typical grain farming or dairy farming into estates. You'll see horse farms. You'll see maybe places like this, like Patterson's, where they're having agro-tourism component. And everybody around them will enjoy beautiful views. The properties around those protected areas will have unbelievable resale value. They'll be the properties that everybody wants to buy. And again, that will help maintain and insulate that community. Now, there's places like Northeast Trumbull County, for instance, the Kinsman area, where we're protecting communities. I mean, 10,000 acres protected in a small little, you can imagine 10,000 acres around Newberry protected. That's kind of what it's like. And so that's protecting the agricultural infrastructure, the feed mill and the auction house and all the tractor stores and things like that support agriculture. Those people can make commitments to those. That doesn't happen necessarily in Geauga County anymore because it's kind of past that tipping point. So these are going to end up being representation properties of what a farm was, but not necessarily a working farm. You might have like Lake Farm Park type things or some things of that nature, but they will certainly still be assets to the community. It's going to take a certain person that can own that and pay the taxes on that, but it'll benefit everybody both aesthetically and economically because of what it does for not adding those services and the need for those services to the community. So,
what happens if an owner can't afford to pay the taxes on it? Does that revert back to, does the Western Reserve Land Conservancy assume control of the expenses?
No, they sell it. They sell it.
Sell it to a developer then?
Well, it can't be developed.
Oh, can't be.
So the next buyer, if they have to find a buyer that is willing to take on whatever that is, if it's a 40-acre property that can't be developed, that's what it is. So they'll be looking for a buyer that does that.
Well, I guess my question was, what if you can't find a buyer? What happens?
What if I can't find a buyer for my house yeah, the price goes down. It becomes an economic, game. It may not be worth, it certainly is, from an appraisal standpoint, it devalues the property. So you can't put 500 houses on, your 100 acres anymore. So the value of that property is reduced. Now, in counties other than Geauga County, the auditor recognizes the fact that the property has been permanently reduced, and so it's taxed at a lower rate. So those taxes are relieved, but the Geauga County auditor does not recognize that. So in Lake County, for instance, if your 100-acre farm has been protected forever, you get taxed at what 100 acres of agriculture was worth and not at what it is based on the development potential.
Yeah. But Geauga County
right now,
recognize
not right now. There is movement on the state level to change that, but that kind of ebbs and flows. It hasn't been succeeded yet.
Do you think the political climate in Washington will affect organizations like yours?
It does.
It's hard to tell by.
It does, and again, these are ebbs and flows. So we adapt. In years where federal funds become lean, or decades when federal funds become lean, we shift our focus towards, more donated easements, private funding of easements, private work in other ways, or state funds, or foundation funds like that. So the nice thing about the way we're set up is that we're so diverse that we can kind of turn this off for a little while and focus on these things, and then if the stock market crashes again and we're not getting a lot of philanthropic money, then we're going back to the public funding. And so we're just adaptable, and that's one of the beauties of our organization, is that we can kind of just move as we see things coming down the line and adapt as we go.
How old is your organization?
So our organization technically started in 2006, and our organization was at first a collection of a merger of 8 or 9 different land trusts: the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, Bracknell Land Conservancy. There was 8 or 9 of those that merged in 2006 to create the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. The idea was, and those land trusts have been around since the mid-90s, some of them. The idea is that we could have, instead of having 10, 12 nonprofits that are all doing kind of the same thing, we could have specialists in our office, attorneys on staff and map makers on staff and biologists and stewardship people and marketing people on staff that can, promote a single mission. So that merger happened in 2006. I was in an organization called Grand River Partners that then merged in 2009 with the Land Conservancy. And since then, we've added Little Beaver Creek Land Conservancy and the Wade Hill Land Conservancy as well. So there are some other land conservancies that are out there that haven't merged with us. Gates Mills and West Creek are two good examples. We're always open to that if they want to do it. It's just, it hasn't really happened, and it's not something we're really chasing. But effectively, we've been in business as collectively for 20, 25 years at this point. So this all started on the East Coast in Vermont, is where a lot of the roots of this idea of a land conservancy come in. Vermont Land Trust, a statewide land trust, it's protected like 750,000 acres. So they have a little different focus, a little different setup. They have large tracts of land, but this is a movement that is happening in every state all over the country, and whether it's Rocky Mountains or the Sonoma Valley or Vermont, it's always, catered to what the land use needs are. So, John?
You mentioned that taxes, local taxes, still continue on property that has a conservation easement on it.
That's correct.
And the owner of the property that puts that conservation easement on it still owns that property. However, the federal government says in order for you to get a tax deduction for that transaction and for the conservation easement to be recorded, that you have to agree to that it be on there in perpetuity. And so it's important to know that it's not taken off the tax certificate like the park district takes land off the park, off the tax certificate.
That's right.
Because we hear that often, people saying, well, the conservation easements just destroyed the tax value. In Geauga County, all those taxes are continuing to be paid, and the land is not even reduced from what it was before. Then the tax deduction you get, you might explain that,
Yeah.
what it's based on.
Yeah, the tax deductions you get is a tax deduction based on your federal income taxes. There's also a state tax deduction that can go with that as well. So a landowner has a property, it's 100 acres. Let's go back to this mythical 100 acres here. And it appraises at this. When you put the easement on, you've given up all the development rights and maybe the timber rights and whatever. And so now, it goes from $1 million and now it's worth $400,000. Well, that difference of $600,000 is a eligible federal income tax deduction that landowner can take. Now, they can try to recoup that over 16 years at either the 50% rate or the 100% rate. So that's how that works for them. So it's a very lucrative rate if you've got taxable income, if you want to protect your property. It is all based on federal income taxes. It does not affect the property tax base, as John said, in Geauga County. So the argument against parks, obviously, that we've all heard is that, there's money coming off the tax base. Okay. But for conservation easements, it's still land protection. It's still protecting that resource in that community and the economics of that community without affecting that tax base. So those are important points to make, and I'm glad you kind of clarified that, John. So it also, just so you know, this is what happened in Lake County, where I'm from. So when the $1 million property goes down to $400,000, when that landowner dies, a lot of times that property then comes underneath the estate tax. And so they're not taxed, they're heirs that maybe want to maintain the 100-acre farm but couldn't because it was so expensive. They couldn't pay $400,000 in estate taxes even if they wanted to keep the farm. They're able to pass that property down to the next generation. That's an important aspect of this idea of community farming. When you're the last farmer and you want to continue to farm, your heirs have to pay those property taxes or the estate taxes, or they're not going to be able to take that property. So the conservation easement in a lot of ways can reduce the value of that estate by taking that land from all the way up here and bringing it down to here, which a lot of times is the biggest chunk of what somebody's estate is their land value.
So the property taxes essentially don't change at all?
That's right. That's right.
That the owner is still responsible for?
The owner is still responsible for those, so it's, they get it in.
But does it reduce the tax, the property tax value, so it essentially?
It does not. The auditor does not recognize it as
in Geauga County?
In Geauga County. In Lake County, yes, and Ashtabula County sometimes, Trumbull County sometimes. So it just depends on the county and the county auditor and how they view that. So,
loss that you have, this $400,000 loss that you have. Or-
Deduction.
Deduction, okay. All right, deduction. So you can, it's either 50% or 100% depending upon what it is.
Whether or not you're-
To your federal, is it, you know, for instance, I owe $10,000 in taxes. So does it wipe out the $10,000 or are you limited
So-
to a capital loss carryover kind of a thing, or?
So I'm not an accountant or an attorney, so I'm instructed to not give you financial advice, but effectively you have a $400,000 deduction that you can try to use up over a 16-year period. So depending on your tax situation,